afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day you've chosen to join us, thank you for tuning in to A Word with Adam. I'm your host, Adam Gerard, and today I'm joined by Nat Cook. And of course, Nat is a nurse, an anti-violent activist, and the co-founder of the Sammy D Foundation, on top of being the current member for Hurtle Vale and the Shadow Minister for Human Services. Nat, thank you for joining us. I'm going to take a breather now after all those accolades.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, there is a few things now to describe me by that define me. Apart from my actions. So yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for spending time here in our wonderful electorate.
Well, I actually live in this electorate.
Ah, very good. Well, of course I didn't know that, but I could say, oh, indeed, I know that because I know all of my constituents.
No, I think this is, we were laughing, this is actually the smallest trip we've ever had to take for a job. I think it was a 3-minute drive to get here.
Oh,
so
incredible.
Very close, very, very happy to be here.
Well, even bigger pleasure to meet you then.
So what was it that led you towards a life that you dedicate towards activism and towards changes in South Australia and Australia as a whole? What is it that lit that fire to begin with?
I think I'm a little bit different than some members of Parliament. I didn't live my life to become a politician. I guess in some ways it was a little accidental. All my life I have taken an interest in making sure people get a fair deal. I have been able to advocate for a whole range of things in my life, both in school, in work and in the community. So in all three areas. When I was in school, I always tried to be part of decision-making committees, representative groups, school captaincy, that type of thing. I was always interested in being involved, and I was a volunteer from a really young age as well. So I think that builds that community spirit. And although my parents led a fairly quiet sort of life in the community, being migrants from the UK and quite isolated, to be honest, I was more boisterous and flamboyant and I guess nosy as well was one of the labels I'd get at school. Teachers would say, don't worry about other people's things, worry about your own. And I'd say, yeah, but this is happening and that's happening. So I think I laid the foundation for that really young. And as I said, I volunteered as from a very young age. I volunteered as a St John ambulance cadet and did thousands of duty hours volunteering at public events and learning a bit of a caring craft. And I always had this sort of propensity. I would sort of play schools with one friend who wanted to be a teacher, and then we'd play doctors and nurses on another day, because I always wanted to be a nurse. So went through high school, really loved all my sports and all that sort of stuff as well, and then went off and did my nursing training. When I got to start on the very first day in the nurses' school, I asked where I joined the union because I'd spoken to my father about how important it was to have someone stand up for you, and in the workplace it's up to you, it's your choice, but the really only choice is to join a union and have that collective bargaining and collective activism approach. So I joined the union from day dot and always took an active role in workplace bargaining and negotiation, shall we say. Interestingly enough, I never became politically engaged, although always super interested, and my husband and I have always taken a keen interest in what's going on in the political world and enjoyed vibrant discussion with our friends. My brother was very politically motivated, and he was more of my guidance and mentor when it came to being a lefty. So he was very much a intelligent spokesperson in our family on matters of environment and future sustainability. He also was a very staunch anti-monarchist, shall we say, and we used to have very interesting conversations around the table about Republican state versus not. And so I've had a few people in my life that have been quite active, but for me, while I did get to meet our past Premier Jay Weatherall's wife, Melissa, when she was a union organiser and I was a delegate, that was a fleeting sort of contact with anyone, at least partially political, even though she wasn't anywhere near the Premier at the time. But I became a qualified registered nurse. I always advocated for people, took place in workplace negotiations, had very heated arguments with some of the past health ministers, generally on the right side of politics, being the right directional, not the correct. And I continued on in my life with my family and local community, and continued to be involved in committees, but never political, and didn't know you really joined a political party at all. Probably my biggest trigger to activism was losing my son. So my husband and I, my husband had a daughter before we got together. So our beautiful daughter is in her, she won't want me to say her age now, I don't think, but you know, it's on record.
She's just 21 repeating.
Yeah, indeed. She's been up and down a few times. She's in her mid to late 30s. And when she was a little girl, we had our son Sam together. And so we had a beautiful family, the two of us and the dog and station wagon and the two kids, and, you know, in suburban Adelaide. And we went through our life living everything for our children. And yeah, as history will tell us, our son attended a party with his friends when he was 17. And there were people there that were uninvited. They caused some trouble. A lot of alcohol involved, and there was a fight out the front of the party, and our son's friends tell us that he had reached in to grab a friend out of the way, and he was assaulted from behind with one punch, and he fell, collapsed, pretty much was gone before he reached the ground, to be honest. Yeah, it was just awful, and set off a cascade of events. One involved organ donation. We got to sit with him for 24 hours nearly until he went off and donated his organs. So we always have that deep connection.
He saved a lot of lives then.
Yeah, correct. And then we had his friends who were all in Year 12. And we spent many nights sitting in a very cold May in our backyard with his friends, talking and trying to help them heal. And we had nights when we got woken up in the middle of the night by phone calls, with some of them, you know, not coping. So we started this community healing process. But I knew right from the start, I said to my son, it's not going to be for nothing, because otherwise that just doesn't make sense.
Exactly, yeah.
It doesn't make sense that you do go through a loss like that for no reason.
Yeah. Especially when he was trying to stand up and be,
yeah,
be what you taught him to be. He was trying to be
and he was funny and good at his footy and interesting, and so we wanted to make sure that other kids had that opportunity, and whether that was through them making choices that were different, or choices that could be guided better, getting better information. We knew Sam would not approve with us trying to create a community full of wowsers that didn't want to have a good time. So, so we did the whole harm minimisation education program development and mentoring.
Yep.
And along came the Sammy D Foundation, and a couple of his friends still work for the foundation. And through the course of exploring that community sector and working out ways for us to help and support and build strength and resilience, we uncovered a range of inequities, or, I more deeply delved, especially through nights where you don't sleep. The reading and the research and the discovery of what it takes to build a stronger community was something that I took great solace in, and got great strength from it. Got to meet many politicians, got to sit around and negotiate and talk and plead the case with them. I don't remember whether I met any that I didn't kind of like at the time or didn't agree with. Yeah, maybe there was a couple. But I think I really became aware of what philosophically underpins politics, and what the difference between that community of people who believe that you have to invest at grassroots, you have to bring the people up with you, you have to provide the tools, provide the economy and the stimulus to help build those people, because this sort of other level will look after themselves to some degree, versus the people with the belief and the values that you look after this top end of town and the riches just rain down. Yeah. I think in all reality there is some balance in there. Extreme philosophical values are difficult to stick to, but also difficult to sell.
Well, you got to convince everybody of one thing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I got to meet a few politicians, and then one day I was sitting at an event at the South Adelaide Football Club, actually. I think it was the best and fairest at the end of the season, and I knew that our local Member of Parliament, Bob Such, was gravely unwell, and the news broke on social media that he had passed away. And so they say.
One door opens, another one.
Absolutely. The rest is history. Yeah. I communicated and reached out to a few people, and here I am. Fantastic. It's as simple as that. Some people fight for it their whole lives, and for those people, I say continue that fight to, please, we want more people to be energised and want to fight to be part of that political world. But for me, it wasn't quite like that. It was a bit different.
Looking at the Sammy D Foundation itself,
yes,
that's been around for a long time now, and it's had a lot of success, I feel, in the community. What is it that you feel either the biggest success or the biggest highlight that you've got out of the Sammy D Foundation so far? What does that mean?
Yeah. We built the Sammy D Foundation with Sam's friends. We knew that powerful narrative was a way to encourage people to engage in decision making. If people can understand a story and a journey and relate it to themselves and their own community, I think they can help to build their own decision making capacity. First Nations people have used powerful narrative for centuries and centuries and centuries. Yep. We've just discovered, I think, that sometimes you can teach, you can educate, you can provide a formula to something, but it really is up to a young person often to work that out for themselves, and to have an example, a contemporary, relevant example that people can relate to. I think that is something that has become very powerful, and it's something I'm really proud of. The program, one thing I'm really, really proud of and surprised to some degree is that we still, I watch the foundation from a distance.
You had to give it up when you became a member.
Yeah, because it has been politicised to some degree, and we know there are still people on the other side of politics that just wouldn't want to fund it because I'm Labor. Yeah. They need to cut it out because the community has owned and declared its love for the Sammy D Foundation.
I've about Sammy D Foundation literally my entire life.
Yeah.
It's an institution that to me, it's as South Australian as something like Coopers or Village. It's as South Australian institution.
That's where we want it to be, just part of our growing up. Part of our young people's journey, their passage to adulthood, is to understand that you've always got another Saturday night. You've always got another next week. It's not good enough, though, to learn those tools when you're 18 years of age. Bullying and violence starts at a much younger age. And we know the consequences for victims and the victimiser. So we know the consequences of those actions on both parties and their next of kin are dire. I'm really proud that the programs today, Impact, Connect, Party-wise, are still the programs that are being delivered, as the same as what they were fundamentally as 13 years ago around that table in the backyard of my home with Sam's friends, and they were named by his friends. You know, I can remember sitting there saying, well, what do we call this? What is it that we call a story being told? What is it that we call a really powerful story that's going to change lives? And one of Sam's friends just said, it's an impact.
Yeah.
It's an impact.
It is. It's almost, for want of a better term, it's a modern day Aesop's fable where you know, the lesson is there, and like you say, you're trying to teach it before you become 18.
Yeah.
Realistically, before you become 15. 15 is the age that I think most high schoolers really start to kind of party.
Yeah.
And you know that, if you haven't learnt it by then, you know, the testosterone flares.
There's some really good evidence that talks to highly trained soldiers and highly trained athletes. It's this automaticity that you get when you practice things over and over and over again. It's no different. You've got to walk away before the gate closes on your capacity to walk away. Because if you get to the point of anger, when you haven't got that skill in you, then you're in trouble. So there's all those things. The biggest debate happened over Connect was easy. Connect was about joining people together with mentors, with peer groups that were going to teach good messages. The biggest argument was, is it party-wise or is it party-safe? Now, party-safe, there are people around that do programs called party-safe. That was the biggest argument, and it was the most compelling things that were said to me in order to make it party-wise were around how would young people see you trying to say, be safe all the time, safe, 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 whatever. You know, you always want us to be safe, you don't want us to have any fun, but if you're wise,
well, it's a lot easier
you got
to
the
rebel
skills.
Against safe than it is to rebel against smart. You're basically saying you're stupid. So that's a
stupid is as
if
stupid
that's
as
the
done.
cliff you want to die on, I'm sure. But
So really proud that the programs are still continuing and they're in the same vein.
Fantastic. Now, I know the Sammy D Foundation does a lot of focusing on bullying in schools in particular. I know myself, I'm a product of severe traumatic bullying for the entirety of primary school. And so I'm with you, I'm a big proponent that this is, in some level, it's learned behaviour, but it's also behaviour that it's really easy for a group mentality to hide behind. So what is it that you think, as somebody who has spent a lot of time understanding kids and how they relate to each other, what is the most effective way we have to actually squash bullying so we can attempt to eradicate it altogether, hopefully, or at least as much as we can? Because I don't think standard detentions would work.
No. Look, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach to anything. Honestly, I think we have to be honest. If any organisation or educator that tells you they're going to come in and they're going to change all people and the whole culture with the flick of a switch, then you should ignore them immediately, because that is not what's going to happen. Cultural change takes a whole range of interventions, and it may be from a range of sources as well. But what I think does make a really big difference is offering a choice of skills to use in a choice of ways, various different ways. And I think that on top of the practicing of it over and over again in terms of the repeated messaging, the engagement, almost going back to that, you know, you've got to see it, do it, experience it, enact it, repeat it. It's a bit, I think the term for that learning is kinesthetic. So you do a whole range of different kinds of programs. I think the key to long-term change is repeated exposure to positive messaging in a participatory way that makes sense to people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with that, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know a little bit now about through, like you said, through the Sammy D Foundation and through meeting other politicians and all that you got a little bit of the bug to run for politics. And so Minister Such passes on, and you take up the seat. What are the emotions heading into that first election? Like, did you sleep the week before?
I think I was blissfully ignorant to the hurly-burly world of politics. I thought, well, this is what I need to do. So I just kept going, and throughout the course of the by-election, there were times when people said to me, you know, sometimes people don't win, you know, sometimes winning's not the outcome. I had never really entertained the fact that I wouldn't win it, and it wasn't just because I thought it was an easy thing. I just thought, well, people will get why I'm doing it. I had to be that way. That's where I went into it. I went into the whole process really informed. I was nervous in the last couple of weeks. You know, the emotions are heightened, and you do a bit of radio, and suddenly all these candidates arrived out of the woodwork. I think there was like 9. I was like, this is very strange. I was confused by the answers that some of them were giving to questions. I was thinking, how would you deliver that, you know? And there was like this big list of things they're going to do in the first 100 days by the Liberal candidate. And I was just thought, that's weird. You're going to be a local member. Like, what's the relevance of all of this stuff? I think that kind of, I wasn't understanding fully of how electioneering happens. But yeah, and then I guess election day, my mum had become unwell. I'd lost my dad in the year sort of before that election, but mum became unwell, and on the day that we had the election, I had to go and pick her up from hospital, and I kept really busy doing things, and yeah, I think I was like, the polling booths closed, and I was like, oh, well, we'll go down. They said, no, you've got to wait for some results to come through. We can't just go to the hall, and I think we're going to the Happy Valley Footy Club. So, yeah, and the first booth came through, and they were like, oh, wow, that's all right. I'm like, good, yeah, come on. I was like, oh, of course it is. Like, what do you mean? But yeah, I think in some ways, having never been involved in it, having never been a part of it, insulated me a little from the stress.
Yep.
I also have a perspective.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I think in many ways we went through one of the worst things that can ever happen to a family, to a person.
Yes.
And losing an election or something like that, while of course it's crushing for people that are working hard towards it for many years and what have you, you know, it's not the worst outcome in your life. Yeah. And I knew that I had my family that loved me. I had a job to go back to. I loved my job. And so, yeah, it was kind of...
So what were the emotions then when it was like the official, there's the stamp of approval?
Oh, mate, it took 2 weeks. It was bonkers. There was a recount, you know, the distribution of preferences, which I just didn't, like, I sort of didn't really understand it all. Yeah, it was kind of, what a crazy ride. What a crazy ride. And I had dropped behind in the count. And Amanda Rishworth was a great supporter for me throughout the whole process. And she had said to me the day before, she said, oh, we should go down and thank the people at the union who campaigned for you, and we'll go and say g'day to Peter Malinauskas, who obviously I'd met before, but not really formally. Anyway, so we went down and we were actually sitting with Peter when he was the head of the union, when a big bunch of votes came in from overseas.
Excellent.
And yeah, we took the lead again, because I was on the way down and we were like, oh, so have you even thought about what would happen if you didn't win? I was like, yeah, no, look, we talk about that tomorrow. It's not, it's not something, you've just got to, you can't put your life on hold and be so completely crushed and destroyed over something. You've got air in your lungs and your heart's beating, there's life.
Yeah.
So I was very philosophical about it all, and but yeah, Pete was pretty happy that day, and yeah, I've remained a big supporter of Pete ever since. So we're very lucky to have him leader of our party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've never said on air, but Peter was my house captain when I started at school.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I've had a lot of experience with Peter. He definitely seems like one of the more classy politicians in the world.
Definitely a genuine guy, and someone that I trust enormously, and I'm incredibly grateful as well for the trust that he's put in me, with fundamentally the role of being the spokesperson for many people who are vulnerable and subject to the bad end of government policy, to be honest. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. As the Shadow Minister for Human Services, what key changes would you like to see to help, I guess, implement further aid to the disabled, the homeless, the disadvantaged here in South Australia?
So I think what we're seeing at the moment is a approach to human services where they're trying to tell us that people are at the heart of this the decision making that's going on, but if it's the people that are subject to the consequences of the policies, I would debate whether or not they are in fact being informed decision makers. There's two major groups of people that we're involved at the moment in developing policies for, and we haven't finished our policy development in all areas. I feel very close, but certainly people with disability is one of them. If I was to be able to flick the switch today, people with disability would all have access to advocates and people who can be a strong voice for them in the community and in the parliament. We get told time and time and again that it is not the responsibility of the South Australian government in respect to disability funding, NDIS, a range of program deliveries. Now, yes, we understand the NDIS is there, but remember, nearly 200,000 people or thereabouts live with disability. Only, less than 40,000 people are accessing the NDIS.
Exactly.
There is a lot of people in South Australia that have disability that do not qualify for the NDIS, and there are a lot of people in South Australia and organisations that do really great work for very small groups of people with disability that have been now completely cut out of the funding cycle because of the cashing out of money to the NDIS. This needs to be reviewed. If I was able to flick a switch, we would remedy some of those things. And that's stuff that we're looking at now, heading towards the election. People are coming to us and asking us about, where they stand in the scheme of things. So I think there are inequities. We've seen some terrible incidences, such as the death of Annie Smith. We've had other deaths pointed out to us at the subject of support that was inadequate. So I think those types of safeguarding issues need to be improved as well. And then the big one is housing and homelessness. Shelter is a fundamental human right. Without question, shelter sits at the heart of the ability for people to be able to access health, education, employment, connections to the community, well-being, emotional stability, food, ceasing hunger. All of those things centre around, do you have a place to call home? I think the government did a good thing in terms of bringing some money forward from into the account of the Housing Authority. But what they've done with it is it's sat there doing nothing. We've seen a really sluggish rollout of maintenance programs. We see people with maintenance disasters in their home. We are seeing people now still waiting for years for a home and no plan for a building program for public housing. So the money that's coming forward is being used to build affordable homes, which aren't really affordable, in that circa $400,000 mark, which, only people with privilege really are able to afford. And I'm just not sure that that's what should be happening with our public housing authority. I think that there is a private market that can be stimulated and levers set so that they build housing at an affordable level. And our public housing authority, why are they not building houses for people to live in?
Especially when homelessness is just going up and up.
Yeah, we've seen homelessness reform. We welcome reform. A government wouldn't be doing its job if it didn't look at certain aspects of service delivery and say, hey, could we do it better?
Absolutely.
Look, no problem. But we now have a government that has put in place a set of homelessness reforms based on a trip to Glasgow, and that they're now rushing through in a matter of months, where overseas it took 5 to 7 years to do these changes. So we're seeing some really big, amazing providers lose their contracts because of this competitive Hunger Games that have been set up from a tendering point of view. It doesn't make sense to me. If I had been in control of that situation and I knew that there was such amazing providers at risk of falling by the wayside, I would have wanted to step in and say, well, how do we fix this? How do we stop this from happening? So I think better reform processes and more houses for people, and certainly better voice for those who need it.
So as an elected member, obviously you're a Labor candidate, you're elected, you have this seat, but the majority in Parliament is Liberal.
Yes.
What are the challenges that come with that? Do you feel, is it almost like being voiceless in some ways or censored in some ways? Or?
No, I think you always have a voice. You always have the opportunity to ask questions. You have the opportunity, unless they decide you can't, right? Because then they can guillotine debate, and they've done that on us. But I think the problem you have is sometimes you think you have the answer and the pathway and the policy that's required, the legislative framework that's needed, and you just simply cannot get the government to agree with you. And also, often disingenuously, they allege that you haven't done your homework and they get the crossbench to vote with them so that your amendments don't get up or whatever. So it's frustrating, but the government is there and they will have to wear the consequences of any legislation that isn't good and that doesn't do the right thing by the people.
What has been the most exciting thing that's happened to you as a member for Hurtle Vale, and what is the plan now to move forward?
Wow, so there's a couple of things. Here in the local area, what has been amazing for me on a personal note is being able to advocate for people who need a voice. There's been people who have been struggling with a range of things around their own personal circumstances for a long time that I've been able to provide advocacy for and get assistance with. And whether that's been through disability support services or housing, some people have fallen on some bad luck and needed an advocate to be able to show them the way a little bit. That is extremely satisfying. Also, the great feedback from the local community and the support and love from people when they notice that you're actually doing something. I feel like sometimes you're doing your job and you're working really, really hard. You come home, you're exhausted. Sometimes I come into the office and there's a little card just waiting for me from someone, or someone beautiful in the community will drop in with a card or a bunch of flowers or something, a garden bloom or, chocolates or biscuits or, something. They'll come in, just think, we want to treat Nat because she's going out of her way, and I share that, I pay that forward. More often than not, that is, something we manage to pay forward to someone else who needs it, the bickies or chockies or whatever. But what that shows me is that people notice what you're doing and they really care for that. So that's the sort of personal human side of politics that other people don't see. And we do, I've had some issues happen, and I've had really great people reach out from across the community, but also from within politics. And they're not all Labor people. People who themselves have had issues publicly aired have reached out to me. I feel really pleased to be part of that workplace when that happens, and people don't hear about that. They hear about all the the Brittany Higgins stuff, which is just awful, and some of the other combative, overly competitive, egotistical rubbish that goes on, but they don't hear about the camaraderie, and there is a lot of that as well. From a delivery for the community point of view, I am so proud of the Wilfred Taylor Reserve playground. That started over coffee with the previous mayor, Lorraine Rosenberg. It continued until a site was identified. We went to the community and asked them what they wanted. It's a vision. It's a space in the south for our families to get together. I get contacted all the time by people to say, what a wonderful playground. It's beautiful to have a space for families here. So that's something for us to build on in the future. It's an area for us to keep our eyes on because it's like the heart of the electorate. And so if physical material stuff counts, the Wilfred Taylor Reserve development is amazing. But for me, it's that sense of community and the delivering great outcomes for people who would otherwise remain voiceless.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here. Now, that was one of the more informative interviews I think I've ever done. It was amazing. I'm personally wishing you the best in the next election. I want to see that Labor government. As an artist, I want to see the Labor government come in because we're going to get more representation. But as more than that, as a disabled person, I'm glad that you're the one taking care of us, because I know that the intentions there are true and pure, and I know that I know as a disabled person you've got my back. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.